When it comes to learning a foreign language, there is a wide variety of opinions, from don't try to memorize words, to don't drill grammar, to don't try to learn but naturally acquire the language, and finally to the old-fashioned repeat, repeat, and repeat. I've discussed imitation and natural acquisition in some of my previous videos, and now I'm going to look into repetition. Yes, we all know that repetition can be boring, and we tend to avoid it like a porcupine in a bounce house. But the big question is, how effective is it for learning and retaining vocabulary and for becoming fluent? By the way, I'm Daniela, an English fluency and pronunciation teacher and a foreign language enthusiast. If you find my content helpful but haven't subscribed yet, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It'll help me grow and share more of my experience, knowledge, and research with you. Okay, back to repetition. If you have tried to learn English by repeating lists of words and drilling grammar in traditional language classes, you'd probably click out of this video right now because you might be convinced that repetition is boring and definitely not effective. But if you stick around, you might change your mind about repetition after I share some research results I found. In fact, according to some studies, repetition is considered to be a highly effective method for learning a foreign language. But the key here is to engage in it the right way and not just repeating words out of context. I don't know about you, but when I was learning English back in Bulgaria, I tried to memorize random words that had no connection to one another. Even if the words are somewhat related, for example, warm, cold, chilly, rainy, sunny, as they all relate to the weather, right? But if I repeat them over and over without any context, I'd still have a hard time memorizing or retrieving them when I need them. So if that kind of repetition isn't effective, what is? The method that works is called spaced repetition. Even if you're already familiar with this, still don't go away. Later in the video, I'll share some research results that really surprised me. But first, let's discuss spaced repetition. This learning method is based on a psychological principle known as the spacing effect. Introduced in the late 1800s and early 1900s by German psychologist Hermann Ebbinghaus, this concept highlights consistent patterns in how people memorize information over time. Ebbinghaus discovered that while new information is gradually forgotten over time, the rate of forgetting is not consistent. Instead, we tend to forget most rapidly immediately after learning something, with the rate of forgetting slowing down as time passes. In a nutshell, spaced repetition involves reviewing the same material at specific time intervals. For example, you might start by repeating a new word once an hour. Be sure to always use it in sentences. Then review it once every few hours, then once a day, once every 3 days, and so on until you find that you no longer forget it. The key here is to use the words you're trying to memorize in different sentences, not just as individual words with their translations. Using a word in various phrases helps your brain remember not only its meaning, but also the context in which it can be used. The issue with memorizing isolated words is that even if you recall the word itself, you might not know how or when to use it. For example, in some languages, there is only one word to express the concept of both comfortable and convenient. But in English, there are situations where you can swap these words, even though they can be considered synonyms in certain contexts. So always learn vocabulary in phrases and sentences. Some research shows that when you use the spaced repetition system, or SRS, your chance of remembering a word increases to 80% after 6 intervals. This means that you need to review the word you're trying to remember about 6 times over the course of a week or a few weeks. After that, the word enters your long-term memory. How can you use spaced repetition on your own? There are several apps and services that offer flashcards where you can create your own cards with a question on one side and an answer on the other. If you like using flashcards, be sure to use the words in sentences, not just the word on one side and the translation on the other. Personally, I've never used flashcards, but according to some research, they can be really effective. By the way, I'll put the links to the sources I discuss in the description below. If you don't like using flashcards but still want to give the spaced repetition a try, you can use ChatGPT. You can ask Chat to create a short story using a few words that you want to memorize. Read it, then step away from it for an hour. Then read it again, step away for a few hours, then for a day. Keep repeating this process, read it again, then leave it for a few days. As I mentioned, research shows that it takes about 6 iterations for words to enter your long-term memory. But keep in mind that it can vary depending on the vocabulary. Some words might take less than 6 times, while others might take longer. The key is to keep using them. Okay, earlier in this video, I promised to share with you something that I didn't know. Something that surprised me when I was doing research on repetition and memorizing vocabulary. I came across a study that shows how repetition helps the brain adapt during second language learning. According to the study, for learners of distant language pairs like Farsi and French, the connections between brain areas used for language and control tasks weakened over time. In contrast, for learners of closely related language pairs like Spanish and French, these connections didn't change. Words from distant languages feel more novel than those from closely related languages, so processing vocabulary from distant languages requires more mental effort. Even after becoming familiar with the vocabulary, distant languages still require more cognitive resources compared to closely related languages, which are easier to process from the start. This means that the effects of repetition in learning a second language are influenced by how new the words feel, which depends on the distance between your native language and the language you're trying to become fluent in. For example, English is a more distant language from my native Bulgarian than Russian, because English is a Germanic language, while Russian, like Bulgarian, is a Slavic language. So speaking English requires more mental effort for me. I don't really speak Russian, so if I try to say something in Russian now, it'll take me more effort than speaking English, which I'm fluent in. But the point is that if I decided to learn Russian, memorizing Russian vocabulary would take less repetition than it took me to memorize English words. Keep this in mind when you get frustrated about forgetting words. What is your native language, and how long does it take you to remember new words in English? Let me know in the comments. Also, please click on the like button if you took away something from this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. It'll help me grow and share more of my knowledge and research with you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.